Mine.
There you go. A little too late, Andy. Well, how are we gonna do? Are we gonna celebrate it with this cake and cookies anytime today or
Are you
not?
ready?
I'm ready.
So yes, we have, and Molly, I'm gonna have you tell what your cookies are.
Oh, they're peanut butter and chocolate chip cookies and they're gluten-free and vegan, so they're super healthy.
Awesome for health.
They're not healthy.
But they're vegan.
But they're vegan and gluten-free, and then it is a chocolate mousse filling. You said you wanted chocolate. so. And it is not, I did not bake. Molly baked. I have a little bakery that a friend of mine runs and does a fantastic job in Bloomington, and so she's much more talented, so I had.
Awesome. We literally baked in time for us to get the cookie and the chocolate cake. And then after we collect those things, carve it up, we do.
Okay.
And then we're gonna have Becky with the service integration. So
And Patty Schnorr just joined us as well, so hello
Patty, you're just
Patty. I
missing
think
out.
you're.
hello, Patty. Hi, Patty.
Regretting not coming in person.
I know. Hi, welcome.
Nice.
And
I'm gonna
I
move
just
the
realized
camera.
Tom today and be part of celebrating his supporting us and all the achievements and just being there for us.
Well, thank you, Patty.
There's tea. There's tea if anyone wants tea as well.
Anybody ever watched that show on television, the English show, the baking?
The Great British Bake Off.
Isn't that a great show?
Bake Off take sponge.
Oh, my.
I always felt like sponge week. It's like the pumpkin. Really roll them up.
They're talking about recipes, so apparently they're watching.
It's like, come up and I'll.
Well,
I won't be shy. I'll step up.
I'm following Tom.
It was coming up for the chocolate.
I thought he was too.
This is after the treats. Yeah, not bad for time considering the train was 30 minutes late.
Oh,
Some days. Yeah, the train ahead of mine broke down, so we had to wait for that one to get.
Oh, in Bloomington, oh yeah.
Might be like two. Patty, I was deciding whether you wanted it on mute right now or unmute, so. I don't,
Oh,
want-
you can.
is it too
Oh, you
loud?
can- Yeah, no, I
Okay,
got
great.
I got steaky steak here, so I'm enjoying a treat with you.
Perfect.
An apple too, which is not as fun as cookies.
We don't have anything healthy here except for Molly's cookies.
Looks like you got Brian and Andy hanging out there today, huh? For the performance dashboard.
Like, this one's open.
Would you want something, Martha?
Oh, no, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay.
But Brian, we might have to organize a run after this.
That's right, yeah.
No.
Needs cake. Who needs?
I'm not quite up to running health.
Okay, thank you very much.
There you
Very kind of you.
Cut it up.
Sarah, you need cake?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Are you a runner also?
No,
No.
that's why
It was tough.
hard pass.
Okay.
Hard, not just pass,
Yeah,
hard pass.
you got up to 6 year run and I was like, no.
That's not what this is.
Yeah,
I have a freezing point of about 50.
Yeah.
I politely find something else to do indoors when.
yes. And I have a running speed of about walking, so that's
Oh,
why
there you
I
go.
would also, wouldn't have been a great.
Well, I think we've, most of us who's gonna get goodies, at least the first round of goodies, have collected them. And so Becky, if you would, on service integration.
Yeah.
Group update.
Sure.
So just to revisit the charges and the priorities, we're really looking at how the various titles integrate and cooperate with each other. And, identifying barriers to integrating this. And so in October, the work group did a survey of its members. The members identified 3 main goals that we're going to work on because the service integration policy is very comprehensive. So we've really prioritized customer-centered design goal, intake and assessment, and service goals. And we are planning to, we had our work plan approved last month in November, and we are doing focus groups of one-stop operators across the state. So we've invited all of the one-stop operators from every LWIA in Illinois to participate in a focus group to let us know what tools they're using at the local area to do service integration. So we are having 3 focus groups next week, and we've got great sign up. And so we look forward to sharing that out after we do the focus groups next week. Yeah, this is, kind of more information about the groundwork that we've done to get to this point of hosting the focus groups. We've heard from the CWEA, the governor's office has visited. We're making sure that we're not being redundant and we're aligning with what they have in store. And like I said, our main focus now, we're not even going to meet this month as a working group because we're going to focus in on the focus groups and talking to the one-stop operators. And yep, this again kind of reiterates. I think I'll have a lot more to share next time once we have the data back from the focus groups. We've also been looking at MOUs and existing documents, identifying how the existing plans talk about service integration. So that's also kind of an ongoing work stream as we conduct the focus. And this is the work plan. So we are right at the point of, this big undertaking of the focus groups. And from there, we'll start to integrate their feedback into drafting the revisions for the policy. Flow of our work. And yeah, I think, is there anything I'm missing? Sarah, Molly, they're of course great support staff in terms of helping the group meet its goals. And I think reaching out to one-stop operators was kind of a new area for this service integration group to gather the feedback this way. So I really appreciate all the work that you guys have done to bring this together.
What's your intention with that focus group? What do you want to get out of it? Ideally, if you're looking 6 months from now, you think, oh, that was a really good idea to bring everybody together. What has to happen for that to be your thought?
Well, right now, like I said, we've been looking at a lot of the documentation, the MOUs and the local plans. And there's talk about service integration. The goal of having the focus group is to kind of dig a little bit deeper about what tools are they using? Where is it working? How is it working? I mean, I think if we come out of this with a few great examples from local areas of they use this tool, or this is how they do it, or this is what makes their service integration happen, that will be, that's what I'm hoping that we get.
So sort of examples of really good practices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we have some local areas which we think they have good practices.
We'll find out. I think so. I mean, it's interesting to see, we've also kind of pulled together websites. How do job seekers enter the system? What does the website look like? Even just those basic things around human-centered design and how the system presents itself in a local area comprehensively.
Yeah.
So those are the types of things we're going to be looking for.
And how do you, it's kind of if I'm a user of the system, if I'm somebody looking for a job or an employer that needs to hire someone, how will I know that service integration has been achieved?
If you're a job seeker,
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of in some ways, I feel like it's the holy grail of this work, you know, is that we want to know how, say, somebody comes in from unemployment insurance. Are they connected to other parts of the system? So what does the referral platform look like? That's a question in the focus group. How do you do referrals within? And is it going to be, well, I've just known Sally for so long and I walk over to her desk? Or is there a built out system where a referral is made and the loop is closed and you know it's actually happening? I think those are the kinds of things that will be
So
really.
someone comes in and signs up for unemployment, I don't have a job. Oh, okay, good, because over here we.
Yeah.
People that can help you to do that, to find a
Right.
job.
Right, so we'll really be looking for like a comprehensive intake, a lot of questions around intake. So that if they come in, if a job seeker comes in from one area, are they made aware or referred to other areas? Like, how does that happen on the ground in the different centers?
Okay,
Like you mentioned, 3 areas. Focus, customer-centered design goals, kind of what Andy was just speaking to. Intake and assessment goal and service goals. Two things. One, can you describe them again, what in terms of exactly what these, your definition of each one of these? I had something in mind, but what each of these are. And do we have a goal yet, or do we have an end game yet in these 3 areas, or that's what this process is helping us to figure out?
Seeing if she can.
This one? Is it this one?
The 3 goals. We want to know what the 3 goals are.
The policy has like 7 or 8 different areas. And so through the survey that we've done of the work group members, we've narrowed it down to those 3.
We can put those up right now.
Maybe pull up the focus group slides.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
that's-
Those are the ones that are really show. Thank you.
I'm like great at taking my time while sharing my screen. So it's coming. It's just my process. What is it doing?
You need it not to be.
Hey, while you're doing that, Molly, those cookies are amazing.
Thank you.
Very good.
so is the cake.
I am not gluten or vegan and they are fantastic.
Thank you. I compensate with lots of.
Yeah, so these are the 3 areas, and this is what's written underneath the area is taken directly from the policy. So it's one-stop partners select and use customer input and to design and deliver integrated services for all job seekers. So then you'll see that for each goal, we're going to ask the one-stop operators questions around, you know, how is this working in your area? How do you implement it? You know, how do you collect customer satisfaction data? And then the same questions will be asked for intake and assessment. And again, the 3 big boxes are the policies themselves as they are. And we'll be thinking about, do we need to be more specific, not in terms of dictating what the local areas do, but in terms of giving them more support and guidance. So, you know, can these be more fleshed out? Are there certain things that we see as a best practice in some areas that could be replicated across other areas that might be struggling to have these things in place?
So what I'm here saying, there's 2 approaches to service integration that we always hear about. This the ideal case where everything at once is fully integrated everywhere. Then, of course, there's the other is more incremental. You know, what's practical, what's doable. How can we kind of progress some way? So where are we at relative to those 2 extremes, perhaps, in terms of what our plans are with the service integration work group?
I don't think I'll know until after the focus groups.
I would say the reality is it depends on which local area we're talking. What we found 3 years ago when we looked in it different local areas are at different levels of integration.
Yes,
Would that be true of different areas integrating with each other as well?
Probably so.
you mean geographic areas?
Yeah, I mean,
no,
it's certainly anecdotally, you know, as we, we're from, or I'm most familiar with, you know, DuPage, Lake County, you know, Chicago, Cook, there seems to be a fair amount of collaboration, but, you know, does that occur all the way down the state? Particularly when the local areas are geographically distanced from
Yes,
one
yes.
another more greatly than, you know, the tight knit grouping up here.
Yeah,
And I guess, because I think the importance there, I'm sorry, Marlon, or Andrew, as the job market continues to change and as the unemployment is going to continue to change, I think options for transiency across the state, I think are going to be important. And that's only going to happen if the local area to local area communication and integration is effective.
yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I don't think that I was really going to deny for like geography that way. And I think it's a really good.
Yeah,
point.
because I would, you know, well, I am retiring, but I would certainly hire, you know, someone from downstate and, you know, help with relocation if they were the right candidate, but, you know, and unless they're looking to where I'm advertising for jobs, I wouldn't know of them, unless through my local workforce area, I had that connection.
Right. Great point.
And that was a point I was going to make. I mean, I don't know how much of your focus is on employers and service integration for employers, but that's a good example that Tom's making of somebody in one region that's looking for a job. It might be in another region. How do they connect together? So you can say, well, if you're prepared to move to Schaumburg, then there's a job that fits your criteria. You can talk to the person and we'll connect you.
Yeah, I think this is really great food for thought as we start to have these focus groups next week and maybe there's even a question or two that we can ask the one-stop operators in terms of their collaboration across LWIAs. And think through that, because I also think that kind of in my mind kind of brings up a bigger question about what, you know, like I said, there's always this balance of wanting the LWIAs to have the flexibility to do what responds to their local area. And then there's this bigger issue about how to support across the state and make sure that everyone is able to collaborate outside of their.
I'll give you an example. When in Lake County, when we have a layoff, I get the list of folks that got laid off, and it's kind of useless really, but they got the name and what they did. So sometimes I don't do it, the HR does it. And of course, we have a place in Wisconsin, so in Pleasant Prairie. So we've hired people from that into Pleasant Prairie, and I know we're only talking about Illinois, but Illinois has got 4 sides and 3 of them connect to other states. So we ought to think about all of that stuff. Maybe that's very ambitious, but I think we should be ambitious.
Okay, great.
Any other comments for Becky? I think those are good discussion, good feedback. Good
Yeah,
comments.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky.
By the way, those cookies are fantastic.
And I was gonna say, I second the
Yeah, I mean,
comment on the cookie.
The cookies are fantastic.
But-
Yeah, right. I mean, unanimous.
What I'm approved of.
I can taste the love, Molly. I can taste the love.
Thanks a lot, so.
And that peanut butter crust is pretty too.
Oh.
All right, so thank you, Becky, and it looks like that focus group is going to be very informative for us when we come back.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, forgot about the folks on the call, please.
Oh, that's okay. I heard that there's a list with dislocated workers layoffs. Where's that come from? For you?
For me, it comes from the Workforce Development Department in Lake County, from the Job Center.
Okay.
Did you
Thank
hear
you.
that? Yeah.
Is it just like a PDF?
Yeah. It's very, I mean, it's something that we talked about in the local workforce board, that's the amount of it, it comes from the WARN Act, right? So if somebody lays off more than 50 people, they have to report it, and the job center does dislocated worker services, including trying to find those folks new jobs.
Yeah.
Similar.
But they have the
All of those.
they have the actual of the people who
Illinois
got
Work has an Illinois Employer Business System dashboard where you can see all the warrant notices that get posted.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
And you're talking,
Yeah, one second, Patty, please again.
Patty out.
Could you repeat that, Patty?
Sure. This year we post the warn notices for the companies that are 25 and plus layoffs. So one of the things I'm always searching for is lists of who is actually laid off, so that I can make that more automated. And that's what sparked my interest when you said you had a list coming to you of the actual employees that are laid off. And I was asking if this is a PDF because I get that that's not the easiest way to deal with a list of people that are laid off. So that's why I was curious about how it got to you and what it might look like. And is it the names of the actual people?
It's the names of the people. So if you want to know more, just talk to Jennifer Serino. I don't know where she gets it from, but I assume the companies send it to her. And so they know who to expect in the job center.
Perfect. I will. Thank you. Thanks for letting me ask that.
But let me open it again, because it was an oversight not to ask those who are on the call. Molly, Kathy, anyone else, any final comments regarding the presentation? And Becky's in the wing, just waiting,
Listening at the door.
and I hear none.
Yeah, good go.
And so we are going to proceed with, I wanted to close the loop or to complete the circle, or however you would say that, or regarding the equity task force charge that was given to us by the executive committee. And just as a ever so brief refresher, and I think at a meeting, what meeting was that? Can anybody remember which one that was, a year ago?
Oh, yeah.
A year ago? The equity, was the official name of the equity task force, completed their work. And led by Dr. Albert Jones and
Lisa Blind.
Lisa-
And Elva all around the student.
thank you. I mixed them all up badly, didn't I? But thank you for that.
And yeah, they presented to the IWIB in June of 2022.
They presented their work, and out of that, and it was really a fantastic report, a comprehensive, detailed, specific recommendations that are actionable, all the things that you want in my company when we ask people to do such a thing. That was a superb example of someone taking on an assignment and really delivering the goods, giving you something you could work with. Well, the executive committee took those results and said, well, should this and they recommended it continue as a task force, a task group, and the executive committee asked us, well, should it go forward? Specifically, the CIC, our committee, should that work continue? Everybody knew it should. Everybody agreed that it should. Should it continue as a work group with the CIC or a standalone committee? And so we took that as a committee seriously. We accepted the charge. And I commented to folks immediately that I'm getting passionate people already giving me feedback on what they thought should happen with it. And I thought it was the feedback I was getting was passionate, what was appropriate, it was all above board. People just letting me know what we should do. And so what we did with that as a committee is that we should make this has to be a fair process. It has to be a transparent process. It has to be a process. At the end of the day, people said, my voice was heard if I wanted to offer it. It was considered, And rather not, we accept their conclusions, it was a fair process and we think it was a good thing to do. And that's what we did as a committee. Everybody kind of remembers that. So we crafted a survey that went out to everyone who are thought leaders in this arena that we're playing in, everyone who expressed any interest and expertise in this area. They received a copy of the survey that has some very, very pointed and specific questions that would illuminate the direction that we might want to proceed with as a committee. We reviewed the survey results, but we also had another step in there that at our one of the last meetings in which we were going to make a specific recommendation in order to be responsive to the executive committee. During the meeting, we opened it up to those who knew we're going to be meeting and making this decision, and they came to the meeting and they had an opportunity to speak, and they took advantage of that opportunity, and they provided the feedback. At least a couple people made their points of view really, really clear. Then after that meeting, we made it clear we're going to. They won't be able to vote, only the CIC will be able to vote. But at the end of the day, after they provided this, we did the survey, we had the feedback from those who wanted to give their last comments. The CIC did make a vote relative to their decision in terms of the recommendation of a task group or a standing committee. And it was not unanimous, but the decision was as a committee that we would recommend to the executive committee that the work of the equity task group force should proceed as a standing committee. And I made that presentation at one of the past executive committee meetings. And the executive committee accepted the recommendation of the CIC. And that's where we are now. There's a couple questions that was born out of that, and the executive committee is considering. Is who should chair it and who might co-chair it. And I don't know where the executive committee is on that. Maybe Tom, as one of his last acts, could share that on it. And but that kind of closed the loop. That's what we did on it. And I've received feedback from several different people who said, you know what, I agree with it. It makes sense. The process was fair. The process was transparent. So as a committee, we met all of our goals in terms of accepting the charge and delivering on it. So that concludes my report. I don't know if the executive committee has done any more with that at this time.
So, yeah, and I'll open it up to this committee as well. The executive committee voted and adopted the equity committee's continuing work as a standing committee. There are a couple of things in play. We need a chair, as well as a name for the standing committee, and we asked that amongst the executive committee members, and I'll make that request among the CIC as well. If the chair has to be a member of the board, so there is no need for a co-chair if we have a board chair. However, if we cannot, similar to the BEC and the CPTP committee, we didn't have a board member that was willing to steer as the chair of a standing committee. But like Andrew is doing for the BEC, like I did for the BEC, there have been willingness to co-chair so that another co-chair that is not a member of the business or of the standing committee or of the member, right? It's got to be a business board member.
Okay.
But in the case of yourself, and in the case of
Yes.
no,
Craig, are you thinking of Craig with Alba?
well, Craig, but who's the board co-chair with it? Freeman.
Yeah.
There's a figurehead board chair that is allowing for a non-board member co-chair. So in the case of the equity task force, if we don't have a board member that is willing to step up, a business board member, and is capable of leading the equity committee, we would have to attempt to coerce a board member to at least, be a figurehead chair so that we can find an active co-chair to lead the committee. So as you're thinking about names or people that you would nominate, there are two differences there, if it's a board member, it's a slam dunk. We don't need a co-chair. If it's not a board member, we do need co-chairs.
And again, it has to be a business.
It has to be a business member.
So by the bylaws, because the updated bylaws were not passed that we wrote to update in 2019, no, 2020.
2020.
Those were never adopted by the board. They were adopted by executive committee. As such, the two individuals who served as the chairs of the equity task force are not eligible. Dr. Lisa Bly Jones is no longer a member of the IWIB. Her position on the IWIB was because of her affiliation with IWP. She's no longer with IWP or in that position. She's now over Chicago Jobs Council, so that takes her out of contention altogether. Elba Aranda Sue is not a business member. She is a not-for-profit
Right.
member representing the Latino
Oh, no.
community. So
Really?
both of them are not available, which was one of the discussions when we talked about, and I mean, that was something that was discussed in the equity task force as well, was if we had a work group of the CIC, they both could still chair, but if they wanted it, which they both did, elevated to the position of a committee.
Mm.
And I mean, I vividly remember this June, Elba and Lisa both standing in front of us and saying, it's not about us, it's not about us being able to leave, it's about the work continuing and being elevated. So it would be for somebody who is an IWIB board member. And as many of you know, we're not really gaining membership. We're losing members, but we have not had those replaced. So we are in a, don't put that part in the minutes. We're having challenges finding willing individuals.
Yeah, so it's worth noting though, as a point of continuous improvement, that fact that the revised bylaws didn't pass. The fact that we can't get board members appointed to the IWIB. This all revolves around the commission and everything being on hold until, the commission completes its work, which was supposed to have been done by now.
They've extended their timeline now
I'm
3 times, but I have no idea what the new due date.
So, and the last one, with respect to the equity task force as a standing committee, is the executive committee also determined that it makes very little sense to launch a new committee until we know what the commission recommendations are going to be and whether those recommendations lead to the administration launching an equity effort of their own. And so as to not duplicate efforts or resources. Again, here's something else that, we're waiting on the commission or the commission to conclude its work to be able to move forward with. So there's a lot of standing.
Yeah, right. A lot of unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Can I remind me, the bylaws, what were they going to say, that you don't have to be a business member to be a committee chair? Or?
There were several changes to the
Yeah.
bylaws. Most notably was that we were taking the appointment process out of the governor's office
Oh, awesome.
and allowing the board, and then the state has legislated that it has to have a Senate confirmation. So instead of having the nominations have to come through the governor's office,
Yeah.
we were saying that the nominations would come through
All right.
the IWIB executive committee. The IWIB and the IWIB executive committee be vetted there and then go for state confirmation, Senate confirmation, not state, Senate confirmation, and then on to be able to be part of the
Right.
board. I think that possibly was an issue. In addition to that, we said that the IWIB membership on the standing committees did not have to have mandated representation from each of the 4 core partners. It was encouraged representation, but we were very intentional with our language, because what happens is we have the same people on all of the committees. And for example, like Jennifer and Whitney and Brian cannot clone themselves. Kathy's been very wonderful and very engaged with this committee, but she's not a member of this committee. Jennifer's a member of this committee. So it does run into just people.
Right.
We see a lot of the
Run out
same
of
faces
people.
from the agencies, yes.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things, in the bylaws. I am not remembering the rest of the edits off the top of my
Okay.
head, but
That was the
there
important
wasn't anything super substantial. Executive committee approved them. everyone approved them, and then last December, 2020 of December, we were to have them on the agenda and they were removed.
By
Um,
the governor's office or
the direction of the governor's office to Director Garcia, yes.
All right, there's a lot to think about here. All right, so Tom, it sounds like the process is on hold essentially. Here
Well,
until,
with respect to, gathering chair and, naming the committee, that process is not on hold. Actually launching the committee, I would say, yes, that is going to be on hold until after the commission.
And you're on
provides
the
its
agenda
report.
today to explain where we are,
right.
provide an update,
Right.
and then also to ask any members if they're willing. But if you'll also notice today, we're recognizing those individuals resigning, and some of the individuals resigning are very active members,
Mhm.
Mr. Hacker included, on the board. And so we're losing some individuals who have been very, very active.
Well, that leaves the balance of us
It does.
harder, right?
I'll keep bringing cake.
It does. It will help, but
Yes.
Give me.
I have, there's a good person in Lake County that would be very good at this, Dr. Carlotta Roman,
She was involved in
Oh, yeah.
actually on
Task
this
force.
board. I mean,
Yeah.
she's a business person and she leads the Lake County Equity Task Force and she's awesome, but she's not a member of the IWIB.
But she could co-chair.
Yes, yes, she.
Right.
And I've asked her if she wants to participate in IWIB, and she's keen to do so.
So the executive committee, one of the agenda items is continue to look at this bylaws and trying to keep advancing this. Okay. All right. Any other comments relative to the report I just gave on the equity task force and next steps? I think it's been rather complete, the feedback that we have on that. All right, well, let's conclude that discussion and related to that is the quite related to that is the CIC membership.
Same tune, different song.
Same tune, different song. As a CIC, as a continuous improvement committee, we over the, I think at least the last year or two, recognized that we wanted to expand our work. Our work is that important in terms of kind of overlooking and providing critical feedback on policy and really being a check as to are we achieving our goals? Are we clear on what our goals are? Are we addressing the goals in terms of the different groups that come for us? And so that's been an ongoing challenge, but I asked to put on the agenda this time, kind of a different perspective is not just asking in a general way, but just can anybody offer any specifics in terms of the approach that we might use to recruit folks for our committee? Please.
Just a thought, since
Mhm.
we are a committee and not everyone has to be an IWIB member who's on the committee.
Mhm.
And Kathy, you're on the call, so if I'm talking about you, and I didn't tell you this part. But we do have two work group chair people who are very involved with their work, and I think they would be a wonderful addition to the committee if they do have the time. Becky came today. I think she's departed because she
Mhm.
felt she wanted to, but I think she'd be a great addition. I think Kathy Olson Tracy for the evaluation committee would be a great addition, and Jay he leads the performance committee and he's already a member. So just a suggestion, they've already taken a vested interest in the work of the CIC, and I think they would be a great addition to them.
Yeah, that came up in some informal discussions we had, and I was planning to be offline with both
Oh, sorry.
because we, no, it was part of that, and raising it now. would be
A
great.
minute. I didn't see.
No, here with both because we know of the contributions they've already been making in the process, both in our meetings and otherwise. So they're great candidates, and I know there's interest on their side. This committee would like to look very favorably on their additions to our committee. So you're right, those are two, Eric, because we wanted to ask, are there any other specific ideas that we have on it? So Kathy, I don't know if you want to address that now, or you want to wait until I get to you later, but Kathy and Becky are two certainly that would be great contributors. So I'll leave the floor open just for a minute, Kathy, if you wanted to comment.
See if that mute button comes off.
We're looking to see if that mute button, right.
What's in the chat?
I don't think so.
Any chats?
No chat.
I haven't mentioned
There's
this.
no chat button.
No news is good news. Not saying
I'll
no.
put it this way. So if you don't accept, then you don't have to say anything. Well, those are two examples.
I'm wondering.
They say silence as affirmation.
Well, that's all right, Kathy, right?
Speak now or forever.
So, yeah.
One thing I've always thought with this committee, there's a whole group of professionals in manufacturing that are experts in continuous improvement. And we have one at UCC, but I already tested with some other things, but I mean, I think that would be great to have someone like that was a lean manufacturing, continuous improvement, Kaizen event. You know, how do we improve systems and processes? If we could try and find somebody like that, and there's got to be, if you look at all of the companies that are represented at IWIB and that we know, there's got to be some people in that community that would be great for this committee.
So stretching that a little further, I mean, in the spirit of integrating and bringing more industry in there, I wonder if either through a committee or maybe ultimately on the board, someone from IMEC.
Yeah, that's a great example.
You know,
Yeah.
might be a good candidate. And certainly they have experts
They
in
do.
continuous improvement, Kaizen. So just the thought.
All right, we get some ideas on it. There's another one, as you just speaking, just occurred to me too. The area of focus of our firm, we're an energy engineering firm for 20-something years. But the focus over the last 5 years has been on evaluation here and assessment of the utility programs across really the state and across the nation for that matter. We work with other states too. But you're looking at Illinois, there's a whole area that we work with on evaluating these utility programs. So let me put on the record that I'll follow, if I get some help, some language on it, I'll send it to an organization that coordinates all of our work relative to evaluation in the state. And that skill set that we use in evaluating utility programs is relevant for our discussion. So another one I'll look at, there's a task force of a whole bunch of us who was involved with continuous improvement. And I'll look for some language, something that I can send out and ask for some, any folks interested in participating.
You know, when Margie retired from the board, was there anyone from NICOR that was offered up as a replacement for her? I mean, I know we're not getting board positions filled, but you know, maybe starting in committee capacity would be the way.
Yeah,
There wasn't anybody offered up, and when Kirk Gadberry
Mhm.
resigned, because he left his company, somebody at the company did reach out to, I think you were on that email, to John Rico and to Julio and say, I'd be willing to take that spot on the board.
Mm.
I did not see that email.
I did
So
not see that
months
email.
Later, when John said, because I had sent something to them and she had reached out to him again saying he's no longer with the company, so he can no longer be a board member. And on the bottom of that was the chain back and forth between her and John and Julio saying that she would be willing to, but I don't know how that works. I mean, it should have been a permanent proxy.
Mhm.
So for example, Jennifer Foster is not with us today. Whitney's going to deliver her comments. There's a proxy form. Marcy Johnson comes on behalf of ISBE. We have a permanent proxy form for that. So I don't know why we didn't do that, but it didn't get to me until
Right.
at least 3 or 4 months later. But to your original question,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
Margie did not leave, and she left because of health concerns.
I understand that.
That's a little bit different than.
Yeah, but you know, particularly when you're talking about best practices and so forth, you know, having someone from a larger entity, you know, regardless of whether it's private or utility, I think is important and is helpful, and certainly they're a major employer. The other name that, comes up that I know has some personal political ramifications that John Rico's brought up often is Wendell, and I can't remember Wendell's last name, that used to head the Georgia workforce. That is now residing in Illinois.
Oh, yeah, from Southern companies, right?
I think it was Southern Company.
Also utility.
Yeah,
That's NICOR, isn't it? Southern Companies?
I don't know. He used to run Southern Company Gas. He made a presentation.
he did to the IWIB
a few
many years ago. While he was the chair of the Georgia State Board. So there's there's a lot of knowledge there and value just kind of sitting in the wings. That even if we do have obstacles to board appointment, maybe reach out to him and try to get him engaged in a committee capacity. Which in the case of Craig Kissinger and, hopefully Jess Gadici and, kind of a launch pad once the log jam breaks and we start getting board appointments. At least now we're appointing members that already have familiarity with the system and the
Understood about
acronyms and
Title I.
right. So
It's along that same vein, so then maybe Dr. Roman that you mentioned might be a good person if,
Might be, she's keen to get involved. I will suggest continuous improvement to her. I'm not sure that sparks her interest, but it would be great if she started with that.
And the person you mentioned, do we have a means to follow up on that?
I believe John Rico has contact information for him.
What's his name again?
What is Wendell's last name? I cannot remember. Davis?
Been a long time.
Yes, I think so. That sounds right. It has been, yeah. Been a while since.
I think it's Davis.
And John Rico would know of this?
And I'll talk to Carlotta Roman. I don't know, is she on the equity task force or?
She was, and she, I think, stepped off to focus on her dissertation.
Oh, yeah. Oh, she's done that now.
Yes.
It's over.
But she's back there.
it'd be helpful if I typed out some, just like, I think we still have it from last year, even just some overview. This is when we meet, this is here.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Just copy and paste it. Okay.
Especially if it's an emailable or something I can put in an email to
Yeah.
my colleagues. That'd be
Right.
great.
And I don't know anybody at IMEC, but there's also the Advanced Manufacturing Association for Manufacturing Excellence, AME. They're kind of a club of practitioners at companies in continuous improvement. So I do know some folks from that. It might be interesting if they had somebody that was keen to do it.
And is there a list, that we may have spoken a little bit about this, Amy, I think maybe Tom. Are there a list of folks who've expressed interest? We just haven't followed up on, maybe we can, not to formally join the board yet, if we're not ready, but maybe committees like this one.
So coming out of executive committee, the two that we are recommending to the governor's office are both Jess and Craig Kissinger to join the board. For committees, for the CIC specifically, you have asked the board multiple times. There has not ever been anybody who's followed up with that to say, yes, I want to join. But please feel free to ask again today. You can give Molly and I's contact information. They all have my email. They can let us know.
And maybe when you do that, expand the ask beyond just board members. If any board members are aware of
Yes, 'cause
an
first-
individual.
Do I have a spot on there?
You can add that to add that to the end of your ETS comments, that, and if you're interested in this work or know somebody who would be, because you do not, for a committee, the people who have to decide is the chair. So you can invite anyone to join your committee for the bylaws, and you do not have to. Now, the work groups, like, for example, the performance work group, that attendance was put forth to this committee and we approved it. Same with the integration and evaluation work group. But for you, you would have to run it by the the co-chairs of the IWIB, so by John, but I don't think John would say, I don't see him saying, no, Marlon, your committee way too big with your whole 8 people.
But that paragraph or whatever, that would be very helpful because it would remind us to do it and I could send that to Carlotta and say, hey, this is right up your street.
Any other thoughts, ideas relative to CIC members, even those are really high quality thoughts and ideas too. I'd be surprised if this time next year we're not swelling with membership.
So meeting down the door.
Waiting to join. They'll be all out the door and we won't let them in. There you go. Has to be peanut butter. Really great discussion. Thanks for that. We do want to kind of take it to another level in terms of just a general request. I think we've accomplished that. That's great. And we're right on time at 11 o'clock. If my clock is right, Andy and Brian. Let me tell you what the thought I had with it, and hopefully it aligns to some of the things that you're describing. I was impressed. I think this committee was impressed with the presentations that the performance work group facilitated and led, the different titles that was presented before us. When I kind of stepped back from after hearing these presentations, I asked a very general question. Is there any themes that after you hear all of them, are there any themes that cut across them? Opportunities, obstacles, insights? Is there anything that we, as a continuous improvement committee, can you help us glean any insights after having seen them all and having heard them all? Is there anything that stands out that can inform and illuminate for us how the process should work, who's doing something particularly great? So that's really one of the reason I asked for it to come back on the agenda now that they've been done. So I want to throw it back over to you.
Yeah, so Jay couldn't be here today. So asked us to just, can I?
Yeah,
use
you
the
can drive.
mouse?
Here, how about you can drive on here.
So just wanted to come back to this. I don't think the committee has revisited this in a year or so, which summarizes all of the separate performance metrics for the various agencies and titles and programs and kind of, I guess, tee this up for y'all for more specific questions. When there's also concern that Patty's here, but we don't have representatives from the other agencies about responding to questions when they weren't here and didn't have advanced knowledge. So I guess I just want to kind of talk about these metrics and sort of point out that they're okay broad indicators of what's going on. Obviously, getting jobs, employment rates are important, but you see pretty big differences between some of the programs, and I don't think that can be interpreted as saying one program's better than the other, because they're serving very different people in those programs for very, very different purposes. So I think, maybe the most is kind of looking from year to year, see what happens. But again, the economy changes, the customers involved from year to year changes. So it's really difficult from these high level metrics to make any real determination about, whether these are good numbers. Could these numbers be better, or are they great based on the resources going into it? But I think, and one thing I wanted to point out, I think this has been added, this enrollments numbers by program since you saw it last at your request. So it breaks it down. So this is total, the performance measures are based on participants that have exited the program, either finished their training or just essentially just disappeared, and we don't know what happened to them, so they automatically get exited. Enrollments is a picture of all of the people that are at some point in the system, and it's broken down by both gender and race and ethnicity. But I think questions about, or do these numbers raise questions for you? Are there things you want to learn behind these numbers? I described some evaluation work we're planning last month that I think, helps looking at some of the outcomes by race, ethnicity, gender that we're going to be doing for Title I at least, which I think adds to an understanding of these numbers, but
There's, there's a few, you could sort of continue to expand this thing forever.
That's right.
And have more and more drill downs. And I for instance, if we could split it by workforce area and look at is workforce area A, who's doing the best work? I already got into it. Whose numbers are higher? Why are they higher? What is there something that statistically they're doing that's different to an area where it's lower, that's not related to the demographics and dynamics of that particular area? I mean, to me, that would be very interesting, but it's more of the sort of thing that you, Brian, would be better qualified to look at. Because if you just show the information, somebody's going to leap to a conclusion that's not thoroughly investigated, not statistically valid. So I think there's kind of this, what could you slice and dice? By the way, there is a conversation going on in the Business Engagement Committee where this website was featured in the last meeting. So I felt some unjustified pride because I didn't really have much to do with it when this came up, because they're asking the question, well, we're about business engagement. How much business engagement is going on? And there is not a statewide statistic that gives you that, but obviously that's something that would be great to have up here. Are we improving in business engagement or not? And which areas are doing well, which areas are opportunities for improvement? I think that's the only thing I would say. And maybe what am I saying? Drilling down into this information is probably valid for the continuous improvement efforts, and certainly for the things like service integration of where are the statistical differences and what is driving it.
Yeah, there is an effectiveness in serving employers measure that is in the process of being added, but it's measuring the employment outcomes, and it's not really an engagement measure. Right. It's still based on the outcomes of the participants.
Because that number is very low, and the argument of some of the people that were at the BEC the other day that are in the job centers is, actually our engagement's much higher. We talk to a lot more employers than that. We help them out, but not all of it rings the bell.
Yeah, and I want to give Patty a chance to chime in here as well.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I wholeheartedly understand the need and the desire to have those same type of measures in business engagement. We've been when you look at the individual data that is up here and makes these little towers, it's been collected, that data's been collected and put together for several years. When WIOA first came out, individual data had to be collected for 2 years, some of these measures that did not have any baseline. And so they were kind of in this baseline, we collected for 2 years, and then we're able to have this individual data. What's not happening for business engagement is a place where the business engagement, like there's not measures to begin with statewide, except for the one that Brian mentioned. That's actually a national measure. It's not a state measure. And then there's no collection of this data coming together to have these measures. So I think I responded to an email a week or so ago to that business engagement committee as well. It's like, what do you want? What are those measures? Like getting somebody together. It says, here's the business engagement measures we want to measure. And then it's like, okay, what data would we need? And like, we go find that data. We know it exists. We know that this business engagement is going on. And so what do we want to measure? this is what we want to measure. What data do we need to measure that? You go find that data, you mine that data, you bring it together, and then you get those measures.
Right.
Not to be Captain Obvious, but you know, certainly when you talk about drilling down further and when you also accept that there are different performance goals, metrics, so on and so forth, for each one of the different, you know, titles and groups. I think if there were a way to kind of level that playing field so that each was represented as performance against their own requirements, and then stand that up to that same information from different titles as opposed to doing it on a top line straight comparison. I think then the data would be more meaningful from a performance standpoint. Because everyone is being evaluated against the expectations for their effort, and then comparing that to others' performance against expectations. That would be my only.
Of course, they have what they call negotiated goals.
Yes, right,
That's what I was thinking.
But they're relatively arbitrary.
right.
Simply based on
Yeah.
trends.
But I agree with your comment. I mean, you know, trying to take a top level straight line comparison across the board is not really useful.
Yeah.
But Tom, as continuous improvement, I'm just making kind of a wild statement on these matters. But if I had people presenting work to me on it and they present it and they tell me that it doesn't, you can't do anything with it, I would fire them for that. I would. If you give me data that's supposed to tell me about my business,
Right.
and you follow right back with it, but you really can't, doesn't mean anything on it. I think we have to find a way where it means something to us on it. And what you just said might well, either way, and I heard about the arbitrary, but something cannot be arbitrary in terms of trying to do a continuous improvement. Now, one thing, and I'm not saying, I'm not in any way describing this, but I know people love to say, well, you can't do anything with it. That means anybody can do anything. And nobody can do everything. If anything you present, you can't, doesn't mean anything to anybody. I think our challenge is to take this and find a way that we can look at a slide like this and make some judgment about performance.
Yeah, I don't know what the correct terminology is, but I mean, what we're really talking about is data leveling.
Yeah.
So that the comparison is relative from one group to another.
It involved taking out the negotiated goals, just seeing which programs are improving over the base.
Trends, yeah.
Yeah, that might be a way of doing it.
Yeah, basically indexing each title and each measure to a specific base here, see which ones are actually going up relative to where they started.
But there's always going to be a normal, well, the pandemic, the economic.
But you can explain them.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can discuss them. You can debate them. I'm not uncomfortable with anomalies or something that makes performance unusual. COVID is a great example. That affected us big time, expenses and everything else on it. So any anomalies is surely acceptable in terms of our analysis, but we have to have some base to compare and evaluate. A given one over time or across is as a continuous improvement. I think we need to have that.
Let Andy and I think about this for a bit and come back next month and see if we can work with the performance work group to come up with some sort of way to put these in context or.
I think that's what we're saying. This is great. We didn't have this information before. Now we do, but what do we do with it next?
Yeah.
And I can imagine in the future, we got a bunch of tabs here of things that we don't have, and then you can look deeper and drill down, but it has to be, that's, I guess, the point I was making. It has to be, to Marlon's point, something that's leveled so that that individual area isn't going to say, yeah, but you're You're asking me to improve and I've got this set of circumstances that are different to this one. Yeah.
We're apples, they're oranges.
Yeah.
Got a lovely basket of fruit here. We just have to make everything be the same.
The same fruit.
I like
Have a
that.
grape that tastes like an apple.
Let me go back to the BEC.
Evaluate them as fruit.
Yes. I mean, there's no way youth median earnings are going to be on par with dislocated work. earnings. That's just not going to happen.
Correct. Good analogy.
Need a way to index them.
On the BEC comments on it, that's what's so great about this. They did such a great job. Now we come back and say, hey, what about this and what about that, including the BEC comments. So what I wanted with BEC and Pat, I got it that we're not collecting it, but boy, does this tell us what we should be collecting and how we should be collecting. Maybe it's not everything on business engagement right away, but maybe there's some specific we can begin trying to work, putting the systems in place and infrastructure to collect what the BEC thinks is most critical. And maybe a year, 2 or 3 from now, we would be able to see this, see it. But that's the value of this kind of work. You can see it so easily now. I'm sorry, Patty.
No, exactly what you said. And that's the frustration. I mean, if it's just from me, I'll just speak up. It's like, that's why I did a PowerPoint a year ago. It was like, we've been collecting, we've been matching data for effectiveness in serving businesses based on the federal measures of a pilot program. And at the end of the year, 4 agencies matched data from the back end of their businesses and what businesses they served with the programs that they have. And then that gets sent to IDES. IDES blends those files. They send a report to Department of Labor, and that's what gets reported on an annual basis. Does that tell anybody the effectiveness of serving employers in Illinois? Not really.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying, I think what I heard there and what I'm trying to say is like, you have to start somewhere. We don't have business effectiveness in serving business measures at a state level in Illinois, unless Brian knows more about that than I do. I have not seen any. So you create those. And when you create those, then it's like, what's the numerator, what's the denominator? Where's the data that goes in that? And then you have the policy, the higher levels that say, we're going to do this now. And when you say that we're going to do this now, then we're going to do it. And then we're going to get that data together and match it. And we're going to match it, we're going to collect it, and we're going to have, and then you get your baseline, like what you're saying. It might be a year or 2 before we're really able to say, this is how it is for the state.
And I think that engagement measure on businesses, by the way, is one that it seems to me at least is somewhat independent of area. That if there are, like Lake County, there are 30,000 businesses, I'm told, and we engage 1,000 of them or something like that. Well, that fraction is, why would it be invalid to compare that fraction across every local workforce board? Maybe there's only 1,000 employers in one, but if they're engaging 500 of them, they're doing better.
Mhm.
So that one is pretty good, but we're working through that, and I think there's a discussion going on, and it goes to systems and all of this stuff that I don't understand, and what we want to collect. And one of the points I made to the committee was, we've got to be careful what we ask for, because we've got to think that through, that in the end, it's got to be a data point that's meaningful and not one that we just collect for the fun of it, because otherwise everybody will hate us forever for demanding this extra data collection burden.
Patty, you described, and I didn't catch fully, what you would need from somebody to act on something. I think you spoke to something like that, unless I completely misheard it. Could you address that? That point, if I heard it halfway correctly?
Places I'd like to explore is that, so if the federal government came out with 3 rates, they said a repeated business rate, a retention rate, and trying to think the third one, Brian could probably shout it out. But then they have numerators and denominators, they have a methodology calculated. Then why are we just doing it at the end of the year with the 4 parts? Like, there's the potential for us to like take those and be doing a more quarterly something. The first steps would be like, well, let's measure that on a quarterly basis rather than annual. And then we're only using the back end files from these 4 partners, being your state agencies. They're going into the files and they're looking at and say, here's every business that we touched based on the programs that we have. And they're like, pull out those businesses. They have this list, all these businesses. And then, so DCO sends it to IDS, here's my list. ICCB sends it to IDS, here's my list. And then you can only report one business once. Can't have duplicates. So they deduplicate everything and that gets sent. But we've been taking the action to match this data at a state level, but once a year to fulfill DOLs, whatever they want. So if we have the ability to pull those files out, what I see, and again, this is just Patty's norm in my world, like start pulling those files out on a regular basis, put them together, start using that legislation and that mandate that the federal government had. They said ESG is going to be measured, here's the methodology, and they have a category of 6 or 7, or maybe it's 8 services. So what are those category of services? And then start mapping out what are the business services under those categories. And then you go grab the data for those categories and you start putting that together more than once a year. And then what you're looking at is like, okay, state, I know you have all this data in your back end, but what is missing? What's missing? The difference of would make this have more integrity. Well, what's missing is that there's probably at the local level, in the local area, that they have a customer service management, CMR. They have some type of database that they're keeping track of every business that they talk to, the conversation, who they talk to, when do they talk to them. And if we can get some more of that information at that level, start adding it to the state merge that we're doing, then you start building on, here's what's actually happening in the state. Here's who actually is being contacted. And here's that a high level, what services they're actually getting and who's trying to give those services to them. So it starts somewhere and you start building on that. I hope that made sense.
I'm gonna throw it at Andy. Andy, Andrew, did that make sense? Brian, did that make sense? And would anybody disagree with?
I'm all in favor of using the data we have to collect anyway. I think we ought to look at it and see if that is meaningful for what we're talking about in business engagement.
Yeah, so maybe that's a business engagement action and to see if I pretty personally like what you said, Andrew, about 1,000 versus 30,000. I can't think of a good reason why that's not a good measure or something either. So between Patty's discussion and yours, maybe the business engagement can make a recommendation. Brian, what do you think?
Well, I was just gonna say, I think that third measure that Patty is that measure, but it's limited in that it's measured by employers that hire people that come out of the system, not people from the system going to talk to businesses.
So I think what you need to do is define what engagement is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And is that definition available
That's a good
metrically?
question.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about that at the next meeting then. So what is engagement?
The next BEC or the next CIC? Which were you saying you wanted to?
Oh, the next
BEC? Okay.
Brian, any more? I'm looking at our clock a little bit. Any more?
So
Audit. So I think the action came out of her too. One's the BEC in terms of the great discussion on can. Right now, I think we agree it doesn't capture all of that BEC captures, but boy, do we have a great platform that the performance work group developed that allowed us to now push back again and say, all right, this is great information. How can we levelize it using the term that I think Tom and Andrew came up with, allow us to see performance, even given performance over time or across on it, and now the BEC question. I think it's great. So we'll find an agenda item when we're ready to talk about that. Any more comments on that? And then we're gonna have a queue up a discussion, I would say, on the CIC itself.
And we might have to actually save that because I think we have 5 minutes left.
Oh,
Yeah, that's exactly what they're gonna do.
Yeah.
When I propose that if everybody, if you would take a look at the agenda,
Sorry.
and we're gonna use this as something as our own CIC retreat in January during our meeting, where we're gonna look internally in terms of our committee. And please, at that meeting, come prepared to talk about these 4 issues to help us kind of whiteboard our process a little bit. How did we do last year? That's what we're talking about in January 2023. Where would we like to grow in 2023? What are some priority activities? Should we use the evaluation tool to evaluate our own committee work? No, just everybody else. We don't want no, we don't know, we don't want any judgment of,
so is something we.
no judgment on how we're doing. So those are good questions. So we're not gonna touch them at all right now, but we're gonna ask folks to come to the meeting in January to help us look internally, see how we can do a better job and continuously improve our own operations. All right, in terms of new business and old business. What new business we already talked about, we're gonna ask the performance work group to come forward, helping us to understand levelizing. I'm just curious in terms of BEC, if there's any decisions comes out in terms of what is business evaluation and what do they think about the recommendations that Andrew and Patty made? I'd just like to get an update on that. At some point, it will come to us, I guess, about these matters. Any other new business that this group would like us to consider in 2023? And I think our retreat, quote unquote, is going to help inform perhaps what our agenda will be looking like going forward. But anything else to come to mind, folks?
So that's what we're gonna do in January, this.
Yeah, we're gonna do that and then may have a little time for something else, but I want to make sure that we spend quality time on that issue.
I put this up here for, we can talk about in January. We had talked about this last January in 22, about utilizing this policy review just to look at some of the policies that have come out over the past few years, to see if they're utilizing this. Now, I can say for certain, for example, the ETPL policy is being presented today, that has used this. Service integration revision is using this.
They did use this, because that was one of my questions on the comments was, did they use our evaluation?
Yeah, so we use this. We also use DCO has their own policy process. So what Sarah and I found going through the ETPL process is that there are many different checklists like this. There's a DCO one, there's this one, there's a chart. So I thought this could be something we could talk about here is like, where do they align and where is their
and why do we need so many?
right. Because it can
Why
be a
did
little
we have the
confusing.
charge to develop one if DCEO has one? And is DCEO only for internal policy or is that for system policy?
Yeah. So, and I'm sure this could apply to, I only know those 2 policies. I'm sure it applies across policies in general that are coming through the IWIB.
Great. So we have a nice little agenda. for
Yes.
next one. Anything else? For that
You
matter.
go, CIC.
There you go. Anything else?
You can be a guest. You can come back.
And, it's a standing invitation. You can
All
come.
right.
You can
Join us
cut
on the
short your
beach.
Italy trips anytime and come here.
Join from the beach, wherever you're
There
at.
you go. Italy, beach. all that.
Physical therapy, whatever.
Whatever.
I'm looking at old business from our meetings, membership. We did address that this time.
Mhm.
We asked, requested Mark Burgess return to a future meeting to further explain the differences in the 50-90-90 rule.
Yes, so that is taking place. I don't know if you saw that email this morning, but Jay has talked to the feds. There was a discussion. They were supposed to come today. And Jay had not had an opportunity to talk to the feds yet, and we wanted to get the federal take on that instead of having the argument between the agencies. So Jay spoke with the feds. The feds have given us direction. He and Mark went back and forth on email this morning about that, but they will be presenting in January on that.
And we talked about the SAM at some point. Is that the same thing? Is the
Is the SAM the
Statistical
same
adjusted-
thing?
adjustment?
It's not, right?
It's related,
Related like a cousin, right?
it's related to, because those 50-90-90 rules relate to evaluating performance against the negotiated and adjusted goals, so it's related to an extent,
But not the same.
right?
So
That's
the SAM will be back.
Yeah, so Sam will be back at some point in the future.
yes.
Sam just kind of should be a member of our committee. Sounds like.
There you go.
Sam's always
Standing-
around.
Standing member.
Standing.
Yeah, I
member
think,
SAM.
I think the
That'll
issue
confuse people.
for Sam, my standpoint is we have, some folks don't like it And I think that some of us says that as a continuous improvement committee, if we think that it's an unfair process, we should at least register it somehow.
Yeah, well, the SAM comes on the back end
Right. Right.
of the program here. After, at the beginning, you do your MOUs,
That's right,
your
that's right.
negotiated rates, and then you're performing against what you've negotiated for, and at the very end, the Fed applies SAM and changes everything after the fact.
And I think as a CIC, you said, if we think collectively somehow that is an unjust process, we at least should be able to register it somehow. I don't know, but rather than, but at least we should have a position on that. All right, so that's the old and new business discussion. I don't think anyone joined us online who's from the public. I don't think any public sector folks with us today. If so, this is an opportunity for you to comment or ask any questions or at least introduce yourself. I don't think we have anyone from the public. I hear none and I don't see any. So really thank everyone for coming out in person and joining us online for our CIC meeting today. I think it was a great discussion, great meeting, like always, and thank everybody. I'd like to get a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So moved.
Thank you again. That's your last time you'll be able to do that. And we have a second. So with that, we officially will adjourn our meeting. Thank everybody for coming. Take care. We'll see you.
Thanks for the party, all.
You're welcome.
There is.